The different meanings of coffin dreams. Coffin dreams, believe it or not, have quite a range of meanings. Some can be quite startling, others all too predictable, and some definitely morbid. Please understand that just because you dreamed of coffins, which you normally see during funeral services, that it doesn't necessarily mean that your dream is negative, or worse yet, predicts something very bad will happen to you in your waking life. Indeed, if you explore your coffin dreams thoroughly, they might produce some gems that you could actually use to your advantage in your daily life. Death, after all, is a part of life, and even while you're alive, the old you is constantly dying to give birth to the new you. Keep this in mind. What does it mean to dream of a coffin? Dreaming about a coffin can be a symbolic representation of the end of something, like a personal trait, a personal stage of development, or a personal characteristic that made sense at an earlier stage of your life, but doesn't make too much sense today. It can also indicate that your dreams and goals have been changing, and this is due to the fact that your habits and mindsets are also changing. Another meaning to a coffin is that it involves a sense of rejection, isolation, or disconnection. It's as if you've been sealed off from what everybody else is going through or what everybody else is experiencing. This may or may not be a bad thing. It depends on what everybody else is going through. But if the main focus of your desiring is to belong or to get accepted, this can lead to negative coping mechanisms, which can be counterproductive at best and flat out harmful at worst. You might want to consider talking to somebody you trust, like a mentor, a pastor, or a minister, or some sort of counselor, to sort out your feelings regarding the need to belong. Because in many cases, it's out of place. You are your own person. There's only one of you. Embrace yourself, accept yourself, and you will be fine. But if this has turned into some sort of unhealthy obsession, it's probably a good idea to get some sort of help. What does it mean to see your dead friend in a coffin in a dream? This indicates that your friendship has gone through some sort of change. It can be a good thing. Maybe you went through a challenging time together, and as a result, your personal bond has grown stronger. Or it can be a bad thing. This is easy to figure out. Maybe you no longer see eye to eye. Maybe they've changed just as you've changed. This happens. People do drift apart. The question is, are you going to hang on to something that no longer exists? Remember, both of you have changed. The old friendship that you had has passed away. This doesn't mean that you're no longer friends, but you have to look at your new friendship and its terms and conditions with honest eyes. And if you see yourself looking at a coffin with your friend in it, a part of you is pining or yearning for those good times to come back. But it's also true that part of you knows full well that that's not going to happen. Both of you have changed. Are you willing to gain a sense of closure and let that go? Or are you going to try to buck against it and possibly set a chain reaction that may lead to unintended consequences. It may be helpful to speak to your friend on a heart to heart basis so you both can get closure and full awareness of what's going on. What does it mean to dream of a white coffin? When you see a white coffin, you are projecting onto that image a lot of your ideas regarding purity, innocence, ideals, and visions of how things should be. When you see a coffin and it's the main focus of your dream and it's colored white, this may be your subconscious telling you that you should not be a prisoner of your ideals. We live in an imperfect world with all its compromises and bargaining. That's just how things are. And if you hang on to your ideals to the point that you become an inflexible and even dogmatic or overzealous person, there's a good chance that you will be creating enemies. And more importantly, you're making your journey towards success or personal victory all that much harder. Don't be afraid to bend as long as you don't let go of your core principles. Believe it or not, there's a tremendous amount of space between the things that are non negotiable as far as personal principles go and the rest of what you have to deal with. Allow yourself to bargain, allow yourself to bend, allow yourself to adapt. If not, don't be surprised if you open the coffin and you see yourself in that container. What does it mean to dream of a black coffin? A black coffin in dreams represent the exact opposite of a white coffin. When you see that black coffin, you are projecting onto it your versatility, your willingness to compromise, and your adaptability. The context is the precise opposite of the white coffin. In this situation, you're simply too variable. You're too loose. You give in too easily. You compromise at a drop of a hat. And you run the risk of living your life with no core principles. You may be thinking the ends justifies the means, and you really have to be as fluid as water to get what you want. But the question is, what price are you willing to pay? Are you willing to gain the world at the cost of your soul? And it doesn't really matter whether you are religious or spiritual or not. You do have a soul. You are giving up your core. And and your subconscious is showing you through this stark image that you run the risk of finding yourself at the end of your journey, realizing that despite all the success, despite all the victories, that in the end, it didn't really matter because you have nothing in your hands. You're going to be asking yourself, was it really worth it? I lost everything else. What does it mean to dream of an empty coffin? When you dream of a coffin that is empty, this indicates that you feel that you have lost somebody who was very close to you. This doesn't necessarily mean that they passed away bodily. Instead, you feel that while they may physically still be around you, you really can't rely on them anymore. You feel alone. You feel the void inside that empty coffin because even though you're surrounded by people who have been with you at each step of your life's journey, you feel lonely in a crowd. When you look in their eyes, you get this impression that although they know you and they care for you, obviously, they ultimately aren't with you. This is the classic case of feeling lonely in a crowd. And what is really disturbing about this situation is that it speaks more about you than them. You have to find a way to navigate the central reality that at the end of the day, we're all alone on this planet. We will all die alone. And regardless of how much you need other people to validate you, you have to keep circling back to this central reality and make peace with it. And the more you refuse it, the more you deny it, the worse you make things for yourself. This is one of the most jarring, perplexing, and yes, scariest dreams anybody could have, seeing an empty coffin. It's actually even scarier than seeing yourself in the coffin. What does it mean to dream of a closed coffin? When interpreting a closed coffin dream, you have to pay close attention to what's going on before, after, and during the closed coffin image. This is crucial. People who have this dream are often dealing with subconscious issues of denial. Are you the type of person who believes that as long as you get other people to agree with you, that whatever it is you believe will instantly become true? That's a form of denial. Another common form of denial is the 800-pound elephant in the room. For instance, you know that your father is an alcoholic, but when you talk to him about it, he says he has no problem. And pretty soon, everybody else who knows your father's problems tiptoe around the issue. They know that sometimes he wakes up on the floor of a bathroom, or worse yet, with his head in the toilet. They know that sometimes he throws drunken fits of rage and maybe have beaten up somebody in your family. But people come up with a million and one excuses why this is not a problem. I hope you can see how all of these can be toxic and harmful. And a lot of it boils down to the issue of denial, either denial individually or shared among a group of people. Regardless of how it may play out and regardless of the form that it takes, denial eats away at the unity and happiness of whatever groups you're part of. Maybe it's your family or your network of friends or your larger community. But it also eats away at you individually because it forces you to lie. The truth, as much as it hurts to admit, can set us free. But we have to go through the hurt. We have to go through the surprise. We have to go through the pain. What does it mean to dream of that a loved one is dead, but is still alive? The most common version of this is when you see a coffin being lowered into a hole in the ground, and then you hear sounds of somebody punching or hitting the inside of the coffin. This scenario makes for a somewhat funny horror movie, but in symbolic terms, it packs quite a bit of meaning. There are many people in your life right now that have tombstones in their eyes. How many friends or relatives do you know gave up on their youthful dreams so they can provide for their family? Chances are, if you look straight into the eye of your father or a fatherly figure, they suffer from this condition. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Because, hey, let's face it. If you ask a kid, what would he like to do for the rest of his life, chances are he'd love to play video games. He'd love to do things that are pleasurable, and which is basically a shorthand way of saying he doesn't want to grow up. Deep down inside, people have this Peter Pan syndrome. But we live in reality, and most people snap out of it, and the way they distance themselves from that mindset is to get married, to take on responsibilities, to take on a job that they don't really like. Do you think your father or mother like being around you all the time? I know ideally family members should love each other unconditionally, but we live in a real world. 9 times out of 10, people in the same family live with people that they wish they could change because there's something about each family member that gets on each other's nerves. And it is perfectly okay to admit this. So when you see somebody who is dead, but it's actually still alive in your dream, your subconscious is trying to send you themes and context regarding this central issue, and how you navigate it will determine whether you have a warm, supportive, loving, and embracing family despite your imperfections, or you end up with denial, passive aggressive behavior, borderline personality disorder, or some other maladaptive coping mechanism. And the good news is it's in your hands. It's your choice. And if you see somebody in your family adopting less than productive or even toxic coping strategies, you can make the first move to helping them work it out. Remember, you can't change other people unless they are willing to change, but you can facilitate the change process. Know the difference. What does it mean to dream of your coffin and burial? If you see yourself in a coffin and you are being actively lowered into the ground, this is actually one of the most powerful and positive dreams you could ever get. Seriously. I know it's a scary experience, especially if you're a claustrophobic, but you need to look past the symbolism. What your subconscious is trying to show you with this very vivid and often scary dream imagery is that a part of you has died, and it's your choice whether to let it go and embrace the new you. Of course, this is all symbolic. This is not a prediction that you will actually die. Now, you may be thinking, what's there to decide? The new is always better. The new is, of course, a response to the way the world really works, and I'm just adapting and growing. Intellectually, that makes all the sense in the world. But we are emotional creatures. We're also creatures of habit. And it's not a surprise to discover that the number one person that gets in the way of deep, profound, positive change in your life is you. Because there's part of you that's always going to cling to the securities of the past. You know that the old you has bad coping mechanisms and there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, but you're accustomed to it. Plus, the future is uncertain and it's scary, so you hang on. This is the conflict that you have to grapple with, and precisely the theme, one of the themes that your subconscious is showing you when you see yourself in a coffin in the process of burial. You have to deal with the strands of subtext and sub-themes and subtopics here, because different people have different sets of circumstances and these themes take many different forms. Whatever it is, get to the bottom of it, because the moment you resolve it, is the moment you will have a better life, because now you're pushing forward. Your eyes are pointed in the right direction. You're no longer looking over your shoulders, wondering what if. What does it mean to dream of a coffin falling toward you? There are many ways your subconscious can position this. Maybe you are in a funeral home and you're just looking into the coffin, but for whatever reason, it starts to tilt and then it's beginning to fall on you. And this kind of situation can play out in a different way. Regardless, there is contact or threat of contact between you and the coffin. Um, when you see this dream, it represents vulnerability regarding the changes that are happening to other people. What this means is that while you're happy that your friend is turning a new leaf and going in a new direction because they realize that they have made certain mistakes or that they would be better off exploring a specific part of their character, that a part of you is actually scared that you would have to go through the same process. You may not necessarily be scared going, of coming up with their own solution, but the process scares you. Like I said in the previous section, it's very easy to cling to our old coping mechanisms. It's very easy to define ourselves a certain way. Have you met people who haven't changed since they were teenagers? They suffer from this. It's not that they can't change. It's not that circumstances have developed in such a way that they're being forced to change, but they just don't want to. And a lot of people might think that this is a brilliant exercise of will, but there's a high cost to it. And that part of you that wants to cling, that wants to hang on, that is too scared to change, is the one that is feeling threatened by the falling coffin. You want to hang on. And there's a battle going on within you between the forward facing aspect of yourself and the one that constantly looks behind you to your past. And this dream is this dream happened for a reason. It means that things are coming to a head subconsciously, and it's only a matter of time until it bubbles up to your daily waking life. What does it mean to dream of a coffin with a dead person in it? If you're seeing a coffin with that contains the body of a person you do not know, this indicates that you are coming to grips with the idea of mortality. Remember, the focus of your dream must be the dead body inside the coffin and also the coffin itself. If this is just like a secondary detail or something that you saw in passing, chances are you are not experiencing a dead body in coffin dream. So, but in case you are, your subconscious is letting you know that you are already paying attention to the issue of mortality. Generally speaking, people under 30 years old don't fixate on dead bodies in coffins in their dreams. They still have their life ahead of them. But once you hit your 40s, then you start thinking in terms of mortality. What this really relates to is your legacy. You've been on this planet 40 years or more. What have you done? What do you have to show for yourself? Traditionally, at this age, people would say, well, I have a house, I had a career, and maybe I'm ready to retire. But most importantly, I have a family. I raised kids. Or if you don't have children, I've been in this relationship for a very long time, and we have seen each other grow. We've supported each other through ups and downs, twists and turns, and whatnot. When you see a dead body in a dream and you don't know who that person is, your subconscious is telling you that it's time to think about your legacy. What have you done? What impact have you had? And there's a flip side to this. If you feel that you can't come up with a worthy answer, the good news is you still have time. While you're still drawing breath, you can still leave a positive impact on those around you. Maybe you can volunteer. Maybe you can give to charity. Maybe you can learn a skill and help others. There's just so many ways. Even if you're a business person and you don't want to help people for free, you can still benefit others. Why? How? By improving the quality of your output, by boosting your profits and hiring more people. A job, after all, can positively impact somebody's life. So this doesn't necessarily, this need to have an impact doesn't necessarily have to be the typical charitable model. It can be totally self-interested and still end up with a positive. What does it mean to dream about many coffins? If you have this dream, your mind is telling you that it's being overwhelmed by the amount of subconscious changes it is detecting. This is a warning sign, um, it, because you're having a tough time adapting. It's a sign from your subconscious that you have become inflexible in at least one area of your life. At the very least, when you see many coffins in your dream and the main focus is the number of the coffins, you should stop, take a deep breath, and practice mindfulness or self awareness so you can unravel this. What exactly is going on in your life that makes you feel that you're not as flexible or as adaptable as before? What does it mean to dream of a coffin full of water? Water, both in both in terms of literature as well as spirituality and history, relate to emotions. When you see a coffin in your dream and that contains water instead of a body, your subconscious is telling you that you're going through emotional changes and maybe you are too busy to notice it or you're in denial. Whatever the case may be, pay close attention to your emotions because they are more powerful than you care to realize. A lot of people, especially in the West, think that they are driven by logic and reason. Fair enough. But a lot of the times, when you ask people to explain most of their decisions, the reality or the real answer is that they made those decisions impulsively. However, when you ask them to explain it, they come up with all sorts of rational sounding explanations. Do you see the disconnect? Do you see how this could be a problem? At the very least, your subconscious is telling you to acknowledge that you are more emotional than you care to admit, and that's perfectly okay. And then after you have admitted that, you can then start working through your emotions because this dream doesn't happen in a vacuum. Other things happening in your waking life that maybe is draining you emotionally that this is related to. What does it mean to dream of a broken coffin? If you see a coffin and it has broken hinges or that it's missing a lid or it's in obvious disrepair, maybe it's even in danger of disintegrating, your subconscious is telling you that there's a problem with how it conceptualizes change. This is actually a very red flag because change has to be dealt with in a healthy manner. You can't be so afraid of it that it drives you paranoid. Unfortunately, there's a thin line between being understandably apprehensive about change and flat out paranoia. And this plays out in the most toxic terms when it comes to our relationships, as well as when it comes to our self esteem and self confidence. Your subconscious is telling you that change is always going to happen. The question is how do you deal with it? And the coffin really is the visual representation of how you handle change. And your subconscious is telling you that you haven't been handling it all that well. Now you may be thinking this is all a surprise because I'm a very versatile and adaptable person. That may be the case, but your confidence is eroding, and pretty soon whatever you are confident about will slip away. On the other hand, you may just be deluding yourself. Now is the time to do some heavy emotional lifting. You have to be honest with yourself. What does it mean to dream of being in a coffin? One of the funniest scenes in the recent Netflix series Wednesday is when Wednesday was tapped on the shoulder by Thing, telling her to get out of the morgue, and there she was in one of those morgue trays, basically this shelf that is refrigerated and it's put in. And the shelf is the people. The coroner usually puts dead people on the tray, and she says, "Give me another 5 minutes. I'm just getting comfortable." I've always I've always found that funny, which is basically in line with a rather gothic or morbid character of that member of the Adams family. But I bring that here because I bring that up because when people think of seeing themselves being in a coffin, that it's almost always negative. They get claustrophobic. But in reality, when you see yourself in a coffin and you're not being buried, you're just in a coffin, this indicates that you need to pay closer attention to how you handle change because we're always changing. Situations are always evolving. And a lot of times, we're not in control. So the question is, if you find yourself in a coffin, what does that speak to when it comes to your willingness and openness to deal with things as they evolve or develop around you? It doesn't necessarily have to lead to your worst instincts. It doesn't necessarily have to lead to you panicking. In fact, it can lead to rest, perspective, and once you go through that process, possibly a better understanding of how things and people are really are, and which opens you up to greater opportunities. It really all depends on your attitude and how open you are. What does it mean to dream of you sitting on a coffin? It depends on how you're sitting on the coffin. If you're sitting on the coffin because you feel that something inside is trying to break out, what that kind of context, dream context, points to is that you are quite insecure of change. You'd rather make a judgment regarding a certain aspect of your life and the range of changes it can go through. And if you notice that it's going past those quote unquote allowed range of changes, then you become paranoid or insecure. This is not a good coping mechanism. On the other hand, if you're just resting on a coffin, it means that you've come to a sense of closure regarding the role and importance of change in your waking life. This is in this context, sitting on a coffin is actually a good sign. What does it mean to dream about losing or failing? Because losing or failing to hang on to a coffin. There are many different variations of this dream. It really all boils down to a perceived lack of control. The good news is that you don't have to be in control because control in many areas of your life and in many developmental stages of your existence is simply an illusion. I know that blows away a lot of people. It definitely can provoke a lot of negative emotions, but it's absolutely true. When have you been absolutely in control of the reality around you? If you want to answer that honestly, the honest answer is no. Why? Other people. You can't control other people. And when you interact with other people, you create a situation, and 9 times out of 10, you can't control the situation. And whatever initial control you may have quickly spirals out of control. Your subconscious is trying to show you in dreams about losing control over or failing to hang on to a coffin, the importance of living in an unstable, constantly changing world and focusing your attention on the only person that you can truly control. You can control yourself. You can control your mindset. You can control how you interpret reality so that it works for you instead of against you. This is one of the most powerful dream symbols regarding personal change and living in an imperfect world your subconscious can send you. Make full use of it. It contains many answers that can benefit you tremendously in your daily waking life. Um, what does it mean to dream about seeing the inside of a coffin? If the main focus of your dream is the interior of a coffin, and you get the sense that you're actually studying it carefully. It can indicate that you are finally giving in to your intuition. There's something telling you to poke into and fully explore how you deal with changes. This is one of the best investments of your time you could ever make because this requires deliberate and purposeful inward focus. If you're able to do this successfully, you'll no longer be a prisoner of your past. It's going to be very hard for your emotions to overwhelm you. You are more likely to make clear, level headed decisions, despite the fact that there are many factors that are beyond your control and beyond your knowing. This is one of the most powerful steps you can take to unleashing your personal power.